waging war is so simple, but waging peace is really how we follow the Prince of Peace, and it's relational and it's connected, and there's a place for every single person at the table right where they live.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Theology in Raw. My guest today is Diana Oestreich, who is an author, activist, and soldier-turned peacemaker. Diana served as a combat medic on the battlefield of the Iraq War, and she was awarded the Army Commendation Medal and Iraq Campaign Medal. She's a nationally recognized speaker at the intersection of justice, peace, nonviolence, faith, and how everyday peacemakers are changing our world. She's also the author of the book, Waging Peace, One Soldier's Story of Putting Love First, which forms the backdrop of our conversation. I met Diana just a few weeks ago. We spoke together back to back on stage at the Church at the Crossroads conference back in September. And my talk came after hers, unfortunately, because she absolutely crushed it. Basically said the main things that I wanted to say, but she was able to bring her testimony as a soldier into her talk, and it was absolutely incredible. And so was this really interesting conversation. So please welcome to the show for the first time, the one and only Diana Oestreich. Diana, welcome to Theology in the Raw. It's so good to see you again. We hung out a couple weeks ago at the time of this recording. Was blown away by your talk at the conference that I had to follow, which I did. I was like, oh man, how do I follow this? But right when I heard your talk, I was like, I need to have Diana on Theology in the Raw. So give us a bit of background, specifically who you are, and tell us about your time in the military.
So I live in Minnesota on the shores of Lake Superior, which is a great lake. It's a bit of a running Minnesota joke that we have the greatest lake. But I grew up in a really small town, rural Minnesota, and everybody in my family, and often in my community, everybody joined the military after high school. And I grew up in a cute little country Baptist church, and I didn't even know until I went to basic training when my dog tag said Baptist Church Other. I was like, what is this? And I went up to my drill sergeant, and he's like, where are you from, soldier? I'm like, Minnesota. He's like, oh, you're not the Southern Baptist, you're the others. And that was like the very first time I learned that there was such a thing as the Southern Baptist. Oh, and wow. We were not them. There was not one Baptist. So I grew up in this little church that taught me to love God, love each other, and also to really love and see my country and my flag and service kind of all one thing. Mm-hmm. So that was where I started, and I wanted to go to college, and my family had love but no money, and so I joined the military to go. I wanted to be a medical missionary, actually, so clock that one, but I joined the Army instead. So I had joined, and I was pretty much done with my 6-year enlistment, and I was a combat medic in the Army National Guard, had done my 6 years, was really planning. I had just graduated nursing school, and then 9/11 happened. And I remember we were actually in nursing school, and just having that shift where you don't know how, but I'm like, this is going to change the trajectory of my life. And I didn't quite know how at that time, but I got called up to be part of the preemptive strike where America pushed over 100,000 soldiers into Iraq overnight. And so they called up National Guard, which they had not done since Vietnam, which was like 30 years ago at that point. So it was a big surprise to me and all of the other college students who were part of my unit. So we get thrown over to Iraq, and we'd only been there like a week. We were going to convoy. We're going to drive our trucks and our unit into enemy territory the next day. And the night before, we always get briefed on how it's going to go. And in the Army, everything is the same. We say the same, where we train like we fight. No one says it, but wildly boring. We stand the same, we say the same. So we're all in this meeting hearing all the same things. Nobody's batting an eye until the very end. And then the sergeant says, there is an enemy tactic where they push little children in front of army trucks in order to so the trucks will slow down, and then they ambush the trucks at the rear because they can't move forward and they can't get away. It's like, I hope you understand your duty to keep the convoy trucks rolling at all costs tomorrow. And everything got really quiet because we had never heard this before. And then he says, if you aren't able to do your duty and you aren't able to keep these trucks rolling, even if a child gets pushed in front, stand up now and identify yourself. And the whole tent is dead quiet. And in that moment, I just felt my heart beat. I felt like I was putting this together, and at the same time, like it was pushing against everything that I believed, but I felt was true. Holy Spirit's like going wild inside there. And before I know, like, what am I going to do right now when I have these competing allegiances? So the sergeant yells, dismissed. And then like I just get saved a little bit by that. But I still have to go back to my tent, and it's only 8 hours till the convoy the next morning.
Did you think, like, was there something inside of you that wanted to stand up, but you felt scared to, or what was going on inside of you in those few seconds?
Well, one, there was a little bit of like, am I hearing this right? Like, am I hearing this right? We're supposed to run over a little child that gets pushed in front of our truck. And then two, I knew this was a direct order. And I was one of the only females in my entire company of 500 soldiers. And it has never been safe to be a minority in the military. Just not. And so I knew that even if I wanted to stand up, like, this would be very dangerous for me, especially in the middle of a war.
Dangerous, like you'd be like physically under threat from other soldiers, or?
Yes, which most people don't know is very common. Friendly fire is not accidental. There's a long held practice and history that if anybody is seen as not loyal enough or disloyal, then people take that into their own hands. And wow. It's a culture that doesn't make the news and doesn't make the blockbuster films, but the hazing and the physical violence and the sexual assault is rampant. They say like the most amount of people who are sexually assaulted in the Army are males. And it's never about lust. It's always about power. And that's where a lot of the PTSD comes from, is being part of, if you imagine a high school locker room where the mentality is that everything has to go downhill. There's a top, and then everybody else has to like come underneath of that, and picking on people. Like as a medic, I saw it a lot. And really? In the military, it's not just someone's bullying you or teasing you. Like people are getting physically harmed. So I knew this is not a safe thing to stand up in the middle of a war and look like someone who is not willing to put their battle buddies first. Dangerous.
If men who are at the bottom of that pecking order are under threat of sexual assault, what's it like being a woman then? Is that compounded even more, or is there a certain code of conduct where it's like, well, we're not going to do this to another woman? Or
no, it's even worse, because I think that you and I both know that there is something offensive to a certain set of men if a woman can do what they can do. And it's their army, and they get to be the heroes and the protectors. So just by women being there, and it's all like pass or fail. So if I could pass the test and they could pass the test, somehow that made them feel bad about being a soldier. Like it was really dangerous, and women were sexually assaulted all the time. And it's a little bit, there's an author, Father Gregory Boyle, who works with gangs out in LA. He's a priest. And he writes all about gang stuff and rehabilitating things all through his faith. But there's so much that gangs in the military have in common as far as the group mentality, and people get like beat in or raped in to prove their loyalty. So whatever happens to you by your own unit, there is the unwritten code that, like, to prove that you are worth it and you're loyal, you don't say anything. So it's a very, it's a really traumatic experience for most people, and doubly for men. They cannot say that. Like how our society is, like, they are not going to say this because there's just a shame attached to having bad things happen to you by other soldiers. And yet it's documented, and the most amount of PTSD is from soldiers who have not deployed, which means that's just them being in the military system. And I looked it up. I really thought violence was the problem, and so I was trying to find the data on it as a nurse, and the most amount of suicide attempts are during basic training or right after. And I really wanted it to be after deployment, being like, if you put human beings into these places with impossible choices and violence around, like, that will harm their soul. It'll harm, like, their head. And I was proven wrong by that.
Wow. Golly. Okay. Well, I want to get back to, I didn't expect that. Yeah. But let's go back to, so after that debriefing, you go back to your tent. Tell us what happens from there.
So I'm in my tent, lay in my cot, and I'm like silently like doing that really pitiful prayer where, you know, you have the little like tears, but you got to keep it quiet because you don't want anybody to know that like you're wrestling with, like, there's this like battlefield humor of like, the scarier it is, the more like we smoke and joke about it. You know, like, ha ha ha, we're going to do this tomorrow. But having like an ethical or a spiritual dilemma, like, that is not the show of hubris that you can let your fellow soldiers see. So I'm laying there, I'm feeling the wrestling, because everything that I've been taught by my faith and by my country says, like, this might be unfortunate, but this is okay. Like, if you are serving in the military, then really you're serving God. And so if I take a life while I'm in the military, then really I'm taking a life on behalf of God. So, like, there's this exception or overruling the rule of knowing that to kill a little child is wrong, like, anytime, anywhere. So I'm wrestling with this. I don't know what to do. And then, like, in the darkest moment of the night, all of a sudden, I just like say out loud into the darkness, I'm like, God, help me. Because I just felt like I was breaking apart on the inside. Like, I knew what I had to do. I had already given my allegiance. I actually believed in all of it. I'm like, this is unfortunate, but soldiers do hard things. Like, I believed in it, but something was pushing back and just wouldn't let me breathe even. And so finally, I just, into the darkness, whispered, oh God, help. And like a lightning bolt, all of a sudden, I just heard this like blast come back at me of God's voice saying, I love them, Diana. I love them too. In this like mama bear growl roar. And in an instant, like, all the tension in my chest melted. Like, everything melted away, because I knew God loved an Iraqi child just as much as God loved me. I knew God cared about their future just as much as God loved my future. And I knew in that moment that I would never take the life of somebody that God created. And so there was this like instant peace where I knew, like, I grew up hearing God was love. I knew here, love your enemies, which kind of means don't kill them. I knew, like, do not kill, like, all these things that I had grown up hearing, but somehow it never, like, somehow I had to go to war to, like, actually take Jesus seriously with these verses I had memorized my whole life. I don't know why I couldn't see it until I was seeing the other person at the end of these beliefs. And I really believe that Jesus stepped in front of all of that wasn't God, and like saved my life by saying, like, I love them, and like, I dare you to cross me. And I was like, you're right, like, I know what's what, and I know God is love, and I know this is God's voice, and I know no matter what happens to me, whether I go to prison or like I'm harmed or friendly fire. Like I had this peace that said like, I know who I am and I know what I'm for. And I'm part of the kingdom of heaven and life first and my country second. And I can die happy with that. Like I'm okay with that.
That's awesome. So 8 hours later, you're now in that convoy. Are you driving a truck or just in a truck or?
Well, I didn't know. So it's 4 a.m. We're lined up. It's pitch black in the desert, and desert black is like someone could hit you in the face because there's no shadow. So we're sitting there, and I'm just waiting to hear my name called, where they call the name of like who is driving a truck and then who is the assistant driver in the truck. And I remember just like grabbing onto like my little seams of my fatigues, being like, God, like I don't know what's going to happen right now, but I trust that I'm going to hold on to you. I'm going to hold on to love. Like, give me courage to like hold on to that choice that I knew was true. And I heard it, my name called, and I was the assistant driver.
Okay.
Which meant that I was like, whew, cowardly relief, right? Just cowardly chicken relief. I'm like, wow, like I won't have to make that decision. But at the same time, like, if I was in a truck and that happened, like, would I be forever part of that and probably never okay? Yes. But I was like relieved for that small grace there. But the next day, I remember we were rolling in to like enemy territory, and these little girls, 3, 4, 5, were like running from their homes up to our trucks. And I remember hearing God be like, see her? Like, see the people that I love? And I was like, yeah, like I can see them. I can see that we're all part of the same thing that God loves. And so I took a picture. This is back like real film. And so I forever have this picture of these 3 little girls running towards our truck. And it's just a reminder for me of really the miracle of like God speaking to me, that I could have very easily run over them.
So were any kids pushed in front of your?
No, they were not.
Okay.
They were not that day.
Okay.
But it still left me in this like, well, wait a second. What am I going to do now? It's just like a really bad time for God to like challenge my allegiance and say like, you can't. It's like marriage. There are no equal covenants here. You have to put one above the other. And I had decided I was going to be, a citizen of the kingdom of heaven first and of life and not death. And yet I was still a soldier in middle of a war zone. And this was like an active invasion. Like this was like not the 6 years down the road where things were kind of more occupying. So I was still there for another 397 days.
Wow. Did you face any other moral dilemmas like that while you're there?
I did. So many, Preston. Because I kept telling the stories, and then I was like, well, wait a second. You know how people, if you have to retell the story, they put it into a book so that,
For those listening, she held up her book, Waging Peace, which I mentioned in the introduction and would highly encourage you to check out. So yeah, please proceed.
So at that point, like I knew what I wouldn't do. I knew that Jesus had like disarmed all Christians. I knew that Jesus, the narrow way, was nonviolence, and that he actually confronted evil of the world and set the whole thing right while refusing to touch violence. So I knew that like I had surrendered my right to violence to save my own life by taking one. And I knew that was like the truest true, because it felt different and it felt like the first amount of freedom that I was like, what is this odd feeling? And I'm like, I think this is really the freedom to like follow Jesus, and that I didn't have before. And so, but I still didn't know what to do. I knew that I was going to love the way Jesus loved me, and I was just going to pass that around. But I didn't like actually know what to do. I was like, well, great. I put down like my right to kill, but now what? And it wasn't until later that I was walking into a village, and it was just really hot. I was a medic, and my soldiers were building like a road, which in 115-degree heat is like really brutal and boring. So I would go in the village and I would just go house to house and use my tiny Arabic and just see if people needed anything. So, but this day I looked around and I was like all by myself, which it was never safe. We always had to be in pairs because this was like a really guerrilla war. Like it was a scary place to be. And definitely if you were by yourself, an American, like it was not going to go well for you. So all of a sudden I'm by myself. I'm in this little village and I see this woman open up the door to her house. And she gives me the universal, like, come over here wave. And that's the first time I noticed I'm by myself. I'm like, wait a second, where is everybody? Wait a second, no one knows where I am. And I look at her and she looks at me and I just have that moment where everything in me says, like, walk away and fast. My, like, military training says, like, ignore, ignore, ignore. But I feel like there's something else just, like, in my chest, like that Holy Spirit thing saying, like, don't miss this. And I didn't know if I should go back into her house with her. I didn't know if I would, like, never be seen from again. Or, like, she was just a cute little grandmotherly bait. You know, she was in, like, the head-to-toe black chatter. All I could see was her eyeballs. Modesty. I was like, oh, my gosh, you could have a microwave underneath there. I don't know. And this was in the time of, like, IEDs and bombs. But just when I was sitting there was something pushing. And I finally was like, man, I can walk past this, keep myself safe. And then this other thing just like felt like a dare to believe that like there was something good on the other side. And so in a second, I just was like, gonna do it. And I walked into her house behind her door. And I didn't know what would happen if I walked behind that door. But when I did, she laughed and she hugged me. And then she walked me back into like her living room where her grandkids and her daughters, and it kind of looked like the whole village was sitting there. It turns out she was kind of the matriarch of the village, and her name was Hassan. And I feel like she's the one who showed me that I wanted to be somebody who would move towards somebody before I knew if they were trustworthy, before I knew if they were a friendly or a foe. And I really, afterwards, because I was 23 at the time, I realized that she really showed me the Jesus way, where Jesus, while we are yet still his enemies, like gave himself up for us on the cross. Like he was a giver and a jumper. Against all odds, and even when there was like risks of violence. So she was the one who invited me into her home and showed me what it was like to live sacrificially and to put love first. And she had something nobody else did. And she really, like, she was the one who showed me what to do. Like, I decided what I wouldn't do, but I didn't know, like, what I was supposed to do now. But this woman who I had really grown up hearing was suspicious. A woman from the Middle East. She was Muslim, she was brown, she was Iraqi. She was really the one who showed me how to live and love sacrificially.
Today's parents and church leaders are facing questions about sexual identity that didn't exist a generation ago. With recent surveys showing over 20% of Gen Z identifying as LGBTQ+, you need answers that are both grounded and gracious. Emerging Sexual Identities by Dr. Mark Yarhouse and Dr. Julia Sadusky gives you exactly that. Research-based insights, practical tools, and a Christian perspective to help you navigate these conversations with confidence and compassion. So whether you're a parent, pastor, or counselor, this book equips you to engage thoughtfully in today's complex culture. Get your copy now wherever books are sold. How were you and the U.S. military received in Iraq? I mean, by the civilians, and obviously not the enemies. But was it mixed, or were you guys very welcomed and received? Was there a lot of gratitude or suspicion, or is it kind of a whole mixed bag?
I was there over a year, so there was a lot of time in there to see the different iterations of things. But I think there were some things that were welcome. And then there was also just a different person who was going to, if people don't bring human dignity or equal rights or justice or any of those things. It's just kind of a different dictator. And so I think some people were really hopeful that the US was going to bring something that allowed all citizens in Iraq to have the same rights and the same resources in voting and in living. And I don't like that did not happen. So I think in some ways, like they were not asking anybody to come in and take out Saddam Hussein. Like that was not a worldwide request that they were asking. So I think having a country come in that they didn't really ask or have much relationship with come and be like, hey, guess what, guys? We're going to get rid of this guy and then we'll fix things up for you. It's kind of like a say what? Like they were a little confused by this. They were very confused why we were doing this. So, and I also think soldiers were very confused while we were doing this, because when you get there, you're like, this isn't what we were told at all. There isn't, like, we're not rooting out terrorists. And this country was not one of the 17 perpetrators of 9/11. There were 19, 17 of them were from our closest ally, Saudi Arabia, and then Lebanon. So the 9/11 connection was like kind of thin / non-existent. And then we get there and there isn't really an army to fight much. And also the Iraqis were kind of confused. And then they also had a system of where certain groups actually got their electricity or they got groceries or they got food. Well, if you come in and then you disrupt that system and you don't have one in place, because why would we know how to run a whole country? People were just hungry and they weren't getting the things that weren't great, but they at least got them under Saddam Hussein. So I think they were hopeful that America would come and bring some democracy, or they were actually going to bring like systems that made people be able to thrive or survive. And that was not what we ended up accomplishing, according to the army. They would say they did not accomplish their goals in Iraq. And the people figured out we weren't. And then also because it was a little bit like the Olympics, but with guns, because so many other countries sent troops, but like 100. So there'd be like the Italian camp with like 15, and there'd be the Ukrainians with like 5, and then the Filipinos would have 20. Like it was very, and so like if you could imagine the coordination between this, it was like ridiculous. And so I had some friends in the village because I kept going to that same village where Hassan lived and delivering it's another story about a baby and delivering clean water and then baby formula. I had my family mail me in Iraq to give to this baby in this village. They would get really abused by different units or by different countries, or like
the Iraqi civilians would be abused by foreign military personnel there.
So they'd tell me, they'd be like, the Italians came in and like did this. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, so there's so much rogue. And it's not like most countries had a high, like they weren't there because they had a lot of esteem for Iraqis. That really wasn't why they were there. And so they really got treated, they didn't get treated well. They got seen as like, and they got called all the words. So things didn't go well for Iraqis while I was there or after, because I have a colleague who I ended up working with in a different nonprofit in Iraq, and I ended up getting to travel back to Iraq, and he invited me into his home, and we were both the same age. He was 17 and I was 23, and we were in the same village during the invasion. And so we like had the same, like, I was like, Hassan, do you remember, did this happen? He's like, yes, it totally did. And I was like, okay, I'm not nuts. Like, we lived in the same time and things are really hard.
So him. It sounds like, I mean, now after the fact, we know that the U.S. lied us into yet another war. The whole thing was a complete humanitarian crisis. But at the time, you know, it seems like there was still confusion even early on before he found out all the lies. Like that, like, what are we doing here again? Like, is this like?
Yeah,
Was
because
there?
there wasn't anything to do. So we were there, and people are like fiddling their thumbs, and it's like, what are we doing here? And so I was there when Saddam was captured. I was there when, I think, was it Bin Laden? They had already got him. So like we kept being like, so we're going home, right? I was there when they found out there's no weapons of mass destruction. So
Oh,
we
really?
kept being
Okay.
like, well, if that was the reason for being here, then we should go home now. And like that continued to not happen. So we're like more and more being like, what is going on? And one of the, because I don't know, are we in our 40s, Preston?
I'm 49. I'm still in my 40s. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Right?
in my
We're in
40s.
our
Yeah.
40s. So, a little more ability to see the big
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
But now I look back and I remember there were soldiers in my unit who we would stop for lunch in this little like barbed wire little like camp. It was a tent. And the people who were out there had found a stray puppy. And so we, for a week, we would do our rounds and we'd go in there for a safe place to eat lunch. And we'd see this puppy. And then on our last day there, the other unit was like, hey, we got orders to leave. We're packing up. So, we gotta shoot the puppy. And like,
Why do you gotta shoot the puppy?
I don't know, because like nobody's gonna be there. I don't know, but they're like we're all like battle rattle. We're in the middle of a sudden. They're like so we'll be shoot. I mean, it was like Harry or something. We gotta shoot the puppy, and all of a sudden like the people in my Humvee were all just like oh, and like we're like sad. And I saw this one guy who's like pretty like tough, this like rural Wisconsin hick dude, and I was like, I think he has a tear in his eye about this. So what was wild that I look at now when I'm talking to people across the country about what we're doing in violence and all these things, like that soldier had this like oomph and this sadness about a puppy, a stray, and we're talking like this is a raggle daggle puppy, like but he called Iraqis like all of the words and had no qualms about shooting on sight. A human being who he did not speak the same language, like was just like standing around. They called them like all the words that people use for somebody here. Like the N word, the this, the that, all these things where I was like, now I'm like, how is it that as like a person, he could have this like real empathy and compassion for killing a puppy that he only knew a week, and yet like in the way that we were raised or the culture or our Christian nationalism or all of these things, like there was none of that for an Iraqi child. There was none of that for an Iraqi civilian. There was just this like true blind belief that someone like had their life wasn't worth anything and I was right to kill him. And I was like, it was one of those mirror moments where we're wearing the same uniform, we've committed to the same things, we have the same faith, and yet seeing somebody who looks a lot like you say or do something allowed me to look at me and say like, how are we raised in a faith and in a country that this is so normal to come into a country and be like, not, shoot on command. That's my orders. I don't. And yet a puppy had a different value. Like it's just one of those like look at yourself moments and be like, something is deeply wrong. Like deeply wrong in this. And I'm a little scared about it.
Yeah.
Like,
did you see American soldiers, or I guess other soldiers, deliberately kill or maybe accidentally or kill civilians, or showing a disregard for civilians? Like, was that something that you saw while you're there? Or
I saw significant like disregard. But the difference between a war zone and America is that in war zones, we have rules of engagements that severely limit when you can shoot. And so our rules of engagement were, even if you were shot at from a crowd, you could not return fire if there was a civilian anywhere. And you couldn't return fire if you couldn't clearly see the person, and you couldn't this. So like, even though we were getting shot at, like, our honor code and our ethic and our rules meant that, like, we were not, I was there for over a year, and my unit was 500 soldiers. And even with being in a war zone, even with not the same language, all the chaos, we didn't kill a single person.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So when you have ethics and rules, they really work. They really, really work, because they put a life and other people ahead of just some of those, like, impulses or reactions or fear of, I'm afraid someone shot at me, I just get to shoot back. It's like, maybe in America, but not in a war zone. Like, we had a higher ethic and a rule of engagement, and I saw it prevent taking lives.
That's good to know. So you heard a lot of, like, dehumanizing rhetoric, but in terms of engagement, people weren't just, like, haphazardly shooting civilians.
Because we have very strict bullet counts. We have strict regulations. We have strict, there's accountability, hardcore.
Okay.
Like, if you shot a bullet, you had to be accountable for it, and it had to go according to the rules of engagement, or you would be written up and you would be, like, put in prison. Like, we just had a high level of, these are the rules, and if you break it, no one cares what you think about it, and you can't hire a lawyer, you're done. And so I think that is what kept people holding a restraint and an account of what you did, no matter what, because there was such a high level of responsibility. And it would have, like, there was no wiggle room on any of that. So no matter what people thought about, like, I think that's fair. It's like, no, you do it, you'll pay. And so people restrain themselves.
How does that square with being commanded to run over children who are pushed in front of you? Is that just because that would put the whole unit at risk, and that's kind of almost like an act of war, using children as human shields or something? Or
I still kind of wonder about that to this day, and that's why I have a lot of compassion for people who are in the military right now, because we serve with this oath that says one thing, and then in moments, if we are given an order, then the main thing is that we have to obey that order. But if it goes against our, like, Army values here, we're supposed to say no. And I think that is it's an interesting thing to swear allegiance that, like, you will obey any order that's given to you, but you also have these values of, like, integrity, honesty, selfless service, personal courage, that if it goes against it, we're supposed to say no, which we really wish that individuals in other armies during World War II in Germany would have said no. Like, so I think that personal accountability, even when your group is telling you to do something, I think that that's a really courageous and necessary account to keep for ourselves.
Okay. Tell us about your journey after you came home from Iraq. Did you stay in the military for a while, and how did it is, from what I can understand, you went from not just being, disturbed by some of the ethical tension to really going on a journey toward being committed to Christian nonviolence. Tell us about that time period.
Yeah, I almost felt like being in the war and being a Christian who was following Jesus is nonviolence was simpler than coming home. Because when I came home, I came to a community and a church that I knew peace was like a dirty word. Like, you did not want to be associated with that. They were a bad character. Like, peacemakers were either hippies or they're people who just didn't understand sacrifice or how the world worked. Like, I knew that my belonging I would get kicked out if they knew that I didn't believe in putting America above Jesus' teachings, or put other soldiers above Jesus' teaching, or put my church's view on things above Jesus. I knew that would be a hard ejection seat, and I was pretty traumatized from being in war for a year. So I just needed to belong. And so I was quiet. I did not say anything when I came back. I just was surviving. My church had, when I came back, not even a month after, they're like, we'd like you to come on Sunday night and give a praise report.
A praise report.
And I'm like, I'm traumatized. I have PTSD. I just have been in Baghdad, and I'm just not even knowing, I know what they want from me, but I don't understand how to give it. I'm young. They were Vietnam era people. I'm like, when did war not be bad? When was war not, the definition of war is mass murder, including women and children. That's just what happens. So I'm
praise God.
Oh,
yeah.
I know. I'm like, what do they want me to say? But I was young, and I wanted them to they're the only thing I had. So I was quiet when I came back. I knew I couldn't say anything. And I ended up getting married to the guy who I met right before I left and wrote me letters for a year. And even when I broke up with him over a letter, because that's all we had, a 3-week letter breakup. And my biggest thing was, and don't write me. So we didn't have an internet or phones. So anyways, we got married, and I had 2 little kids in 2 years, and I feel like that was the healing time for me of getting to see goodness and that smallness, and kind of heal. And as they got a little older, that's when I started working with a group who was in Iraq, and their mission was kind of to unmake the violence that the US was doing. And so that meant a lot to me. So I signed up with them, and then they had me tell my story once. And then afterwards, it was at it was a Southern College chapel, some big Birmingham. Oh, what was it? Okay. Samford University down south.
Yeah.
I'm from the north. I'd never even really been down south. And so I was like, ooh. So I tell my story up there to this huge chapel. And that's also in the book. There were some incidences there. But this person asked me after, they're like, so what does your family think? And what does your military family think in your church? I'm like, I don't know. This is the first time I've ever said it out loud. So
what was the content of what you said? What was it basically? Kind of
same story of went to war, okay. Jesus told me to lay down my weapon, okay. And peacemaker, yeah. I'm gonna live like Christ, but I won't take a life like Christ, because he never did. Which is deeply offensive to this chapel service. Oh. So that was the first time I said it out loud, and this was before really podcasts, but they did put it up on their little streaming thing. And so I kind of low-key just I'm like, well, the cat's out of the bag, and now people in my family know, and if they want to talk to me about it, they can. But we're Midwest, so it's a lot of silence. If someone doesn't like your haircut, they're just gonna not say it, but say it to everybody else. Yes. So I still find it hard. It's a very hard thing to follow Jesus's command of nonviolence when other people in my family and my friends and my faith find that extremely threatening and very angry about, because I'm putting Jesus first, and that means somehow that I'm disloyal to their theology, I'm disloyal to their worldview, I'm disloyal to their country. I'm like, I am the troop. I get asked a lot. They're like, well, how can you say this and support the troops? I'm like, I am the troop. What are you? What's happening? I'm like, peace is the most patriotic thing you can do, because it puts values on soldiers' lives. It actually protects them. It stops using them as the knee-jerk reaction to solve any problem. I'm like, it respects their lives. It's good for their kids. like work for peace. That's how you support soldiers presently and also when they're older. Like these have such tremendous cost to families and kids and their futures. So I'm like, act like their lives matter. Don't let them get sent. We're in 82% of the countries on the planet today. Boots on the ground.
82%.
I'm like, like one, if that was China, people would be worried. They'd be like, they're going to dominate the world. And I'm like, but it's us. It's cool. So I'm like, I don't think that's really honoring the oath that soldiers took by sending them all over the planet. I'm like, I don't think that's respectful. I don't think that is honoring what they signed up to do. I don't think it's actually good for them. I think it's not.
The Exiles in Babylon Conference is happening again, April 30th to May 2nd in Minneapolis, and this one is going to be spicy. We're talking about mental health and the gospel. How should the church respond to immigration? We're also having a dialogical debate about Christians at war with Shane Claiborne and Paul Copan, and we're also having another dialogical debate between Peter Enns and Sandy Richter over the historical reliability of the Bible. We also added a pre-conference addressing how Christians should think about artificial intelligence. We have several experts coming to lead us in that conversation. Other speakers include Dan Allender, Matthew Sorens, Liliana Reza, Joshua Smith, Chinwei Williams, and several others. And of course, worth the price of admission, Street Hymns is coming back as well, folks. Most of all, the in-person experience at Exiles is just super unique. I mean, I don't know. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to describe. You just got to go and experience it for yourself. Right now, we're running an early bird discount of $30 off registration. So I encourage you to sign up soon to take advantage of this discount. Just head over to theologyintheraw.com to register. We also have a heavily discounted Gen Z price. Don't lie about your age. You got to be Gen Z. And also discounts on groups of 5 or more. Again, that's April 30th to May 2nd in Minneapolis. Register at theologyintheraw.com. What do you think that is? Why is there such a visceral, almost angry, sometimes very angry reaction when a Christian to another Christian says, I want peace. I don't want to kill. I think war is not a good thing. Even if you still, maybe there are, let's just say a just war theory. Maybe there is a place for war as a last result, self-defense, blah, blah, blah. But in general, we don't want to go and kill people. We would rather not do that. Like in Christians, because I've experienced this too, not from you had the testimony. I'm just a theologian, interpreting verses and stuff.
But they listen to you. They listen to you.
Well, I for whatever reason, like to indulge in controversial topics. I have never experienced such visceral, frighteningly angry reactions from Christians, not non-Christians, but Christians, when I say basic things like loving your enemies might mean we don't kill them, or maybe Christians shouldn't support this war or that war, or maybe we should be more focused on peace than killing people to achieve justice. Like, and that's just people sometimes lose their minds. Why I don't know. Like it's confusing.
Well, I have a framework for that.
Okay.
And I can say this because I was once that person. Okay. I'm like, I was there. I completely believed all of these things that really had like the supremacy was the right to kill and the right to be on top. And Jesus was like, Jesus's words had to be basically overruled for that worldview to exist. And so, but I was raised in it. So I was like, God, guns, and country, hoorah. Like, I mean, how does an 18-year-old make a speech in high school for the death penalty? Who drives a VW Bug? Like, what? I was like, where did this come from? So I think that was my crisis in the middle of everything. But when I look back on it, it wasn't a crisis of faith. It was Jesus challenging the faith and the worldview that told me that like we were basically God. Like God says, do not kill, but American exceptionalism says we will, and it'll be right if we do. Like it's this dominion thing. And I think I experienced it. So I have mega compassion for people.
Yeah.
But I also know it is a spiritual dominion, a principality, and a sickness. Like that violence that says that we can do whatever it takes to like somebody else. I'm like, that is a sticky thing. It connects to us. I think that was kind of like Satan's original sin, is it says that he wanted more dominion. Like he wanted to be God. God said, you can do this. He's like, I want more. And I think that that whole thing is so, it sticks to us. It makes us want to be that. Like there's a power of feeling like you are the right one. And if I can set things right by that war, this gun, that thing, that's a heady power. And I think that it brings out the worst in people. And I think that's why Jesus actually comes to like save us from that thinking, from that living. Like all of human history, like that's all people did. So change the uniform, change the reason behind it, but they waged wars and they killed people to be on top. And they did it because they were right, because something they were bringing was going to set the world right. But as Christians, Jesus is the only thing that sets the world right. And if Jesus did it without violence, like how then can like the student be above the teacher and say, I'll do what he even says, like, we're not going to do. So I think that deep down, it's a real, like, spiritual bondage of power. And,
That's helpful. Yeah.
and, and it's tough to surrender your power to Christ. And I do wonder, I'm like, so what exactly did you surrender when you went under the water for that baptism? Like, what did you do? Like, what's different? Like, either you're going to follow Jesus, the nonviolent Jesus, and like live as Christ or die as Christ.
Yeah.
But Christ never, all those things of empire, the whole cool thing about him, of why my Muslim friends look up to him, why Gandhi read the Sermon on the Mount
Yeah.
hour a day for 40 years, because he thinks that like the way of Jesus actually is how we change the whole world by changing ourselves. Like that's the real stuff.
Yeah.
And people say that if Christians would just read Jesus's Sermon on the Mount for 30 years, let Paul be Paul for a while, let everybody else, we've already studied them. Just listen to Jesus's words every single day for 30 years, then we would have the beginning chance of creating God's dream here on earth. But I think it's that power thing. And I went through it, I see it, but I'm like, when people think that they are having somebody who is not loyal to them, it's that idolatry. It's that if someone won't bow down to your idol, there's a big reaction to that. Like people get real mad. The only like real like Christians about nonviolence and about guns. And I'm not talking the Second Amendment. I'm just saying like there are many legal things that out of my like submission to Christ and the world he wants to bring, I'm just not going to do it. Other people can, but I'm choosing to live without that, because that's not the world that he's creating here on earth or in heaven.
Have you seen any breakthrough? I'm sure you have in all your talks. I mean, you speak publicly a lot. You've written books and have many conversations with people. Have you seen somebody go from this clinging to the idolatry of the American empire and its militarism that promotes it to, at the very least, like, wow, I need to kind of really rethink these things? Like, do you have some of those stories you can tell?
I mean, I think there are a lot of those stories, and a lot of them that I hear are from veterans. And veterans say, like, they're like, oh yeah, Diana, I totally had the same experience as you, but I don't tell anybody, my family, my church, because I don't want to rock the boat for them. Like, they know that following Jesus's real like call to live without violence, like rocks other people's boats so bad that they won't even share their own. So, like, a lot of veterans have this same story. They're the ones who are like, yes, like you put into
Mm.
words this thing that I knew, but I didn't know how to like put into action or how to say it.
Mm.
Um, and then there's also people who, when they read my book or hear my story, they're like, oh, so they're looking for a better invitation to care for veterans or care for soldiers and their family or to actually practice their faith. And so oftentimes I feel like people say, I just didn't get an invitation. Like I didn't know. I only thought there was one way to love my country or to serve Jesus. I didn't know there was this third way.
Oh,
So I
okay.
see a lot of
Yeah.
people who just need an invitation. Like
Yeah.
I had never heard anybody in a pulpit ever say Jesus, God calls Jesus the Prince of Peace, unless it was on December 25th was when we like let that verse roll. But I had never even like heard it. So I think there's also another lady in Orange County and I was speaking and she came up to me after and the pastor was like, oh, there's this lady, she's big in our church. Oh, like Diana, like steer clear of her, you know? And I was like, because pastors oftentimes have me come in to speak when they know, like they know their people need to hear it. They know the Holy Spirit is telling them to do this, but they need somebody else to say the
Yeah.
hard thing. And if they have them, and then they just have me come do it, and then like they can, still be like oh yeah, okay. They need someone else to say it who's outside the community to keep like their community moving forward in
Yeah.
it.
Huh.
But she came up to me after and she was like, oh, honey, she's like, my son is, special forces in the Marines. She's like, and everything you said should have made me so mad, but the Holy Spirit's using you because it came across like melted butter. And I
Yeah.
was like, huh. So, like, even for me, I feel like I wasn't a bad person then. I'm not a good person now, but
No.
Jesus really did invite me to love
Hmm.
the way he loved. Like, I didn't have a lot of love for people
Yeah.
like he
Huh.
did outside of people that looked like me, talked like me, voted like me, worshiped like me.
Yeah.
And that expansiveness of love, I feel like it connects with people, even if they don't want it to. Like, God's
Yeah.
love is infectious. Like,
Yeah.
it makes us so hopeful. It makes us like each other. It makes us want better for each other. And I think I continue to see people see that there's a love that they had been missing and it actually been like preached against.
Yeah.
But it still brings life and they feel it and they feel permission to say, God loves Gaza. They have
Hmm.
permission to
Hmm.
say, guess what? When Black lives are being taken, Black lives matter. Like, I think they need to see this courageous love that isn't all about agreement, but it is about um, showing up for people and saying their life is valuable without prejudice. Um, I think that is really what God does, and I've seen people change because all those old things, like they're not super life giving, and they're not very strategic, and they're not successful, and the fruit is lame. Like, it's not good fruit from that stuff. Like, if you look at what you want to build, it doesn't build much.
Right.
And
Do you-
soldiers aren't doing awesome. So I'm
yeah.
like, if you want to do something, you should probably do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you? I mean, I feel like, and maybe I'm naive, or maybe I'm in too much of an echo chamber, but I feel like things are changing a bit in the sense that more and more Christians are not as sort of pro-war as they used to be. I mean, everybody knows that Iraq was a total lie and led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, including American soldiers, and all the PTSD and suicides that result from that. And the last 2 years of watching one of the most horrific massacres of women and children being live streamed before us. I feel like there's more of talk about Israel and Gaza. It seems like there's more of an awareness of the realities of war, partly the internet. You have even conservative commentators like Tucker Carlson being very anti-war these days, and it's giving conservative Christians maybe a permission to say maybe this isn't At the very least, I mean, it could also come from like an America First perspective. Like, why are my tax dollars going to do this? So it could be kind of, maybe the motivation isn't deeply rooted in like Jesus, but there does seem to be less enthusiasm for war as we have had previously. Is that just, am I misperceiving things, or have you seen the same thing
No,
more recently?
I love to hear that, because I feel like I don't have really an echo chamber, so I love to hear what other people are
Huh.
echoing.
Yeah.
And that's so hopeful to me. I really think that I do think watching an atrocity be live streamed with our guns and with our weapons has people being like, huh, so
Yeah.
I don't know about that,
Right.
So I do think that there is an ability to like critique war. And I know like there's all the books for the just war theory, but we're in the present.
Right.
And I feel like right now, like we will get to, we either create courage and we create a way to say, like, Jesus didn't go for war. And in fact, the world that Jesus is building doesn't have that in it. So we want to be part of that. I think there is a shift, and I think there is a change. I think that Gaza is absolutely like extreme, and maybe it takes something like that will go down in the history books on us, to have people start to be able to say, I can love my country, and we can say that war is not working, and war is not getting us where we want to go, and in fact how we're doing it is harmful, um, for all of us, including the planet and including our kids, because our kids will pay the price for the wars that we do today. So
Yeah.
I think there is a shift, and I think there's a shift in church spaces. I think that I know a lot of Vietnam veterans, and they're just delightful. And also, they all say Vietnam was the worst, and it was absolutely wrong. And I have asked, like, why doesn't anyone say anything about that? And they're like, we don't know. So I think if we start to talk about the way that war isn't working, and war, like, you can't really send Bibles to a country that you're also sending bombs to. Like, you got to hold those two things, because it's called integrity. Like, you can only be one person. So I think that there is this shift to say, like, we don't have to kiss the ring on this. Like, we have a faith that has a voice, and that is not disloyal. That does not challenge.
Right.
And if like war is our loyalty, then that's your only loyalty. But you can't blindly accept a war and not think that your faith is really being erased in that, or like superseded, or like taken out of that. I think there is a change, and I think that the youth also are wondering. I work a lot with like Israeli youth who are refusing to join the military as a public protest to build a country that doesn't have apartheid. They're like, we want a future, and we need everybody to say that what we've been doing isn't working. And so how they're creating that public conversation is by refusing, because they're all drafted at 18.
Yeah.
And she's so hopeful. She's like, once we stop being a cog in something that is causing harm, instead of building the future that creates a safe place for Israelis to live and Palestinians to live, we're actually creating a future. And I think that the US is starting to do that too, that says, wait a second.
Yeah.
Like, we want something that lines up with our faith. We want something that lines up with building a future for people, with our integrity. And we're going to question these endless wars, and we're going to question what that actually means for us.
There is a generational difference for sure. I mean, every poll I've read, massive generational difference between younger people. Let's just say our age and younger, Diana, and people older than us. And I think part of it, I think a big part of it is people's news source. Like older people typically still get their news from like mainstream media outlets and stuff, and talking points, this, that, and they have more of a trust for maybe the government and the glorious days of like World War II or whatever. And now I think younger people are kind of like, they have an internet connection. They can see behind the scenes. They can look past the popular narratives and say, no, there's our government has lied us into basically every war in the last century. And like, we can
Yeah.
see that nothing good has come about it. And I can't afford a house anymore. And why are the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer? And all this money is going to fund these foreign wars that have nothing to do with me. And, so I do think there is a massive generational difference, which has grown, which, as older people end up dying off and younger people, are coming on the scene. I think that the perspective is definitely shifting from that point of view. I would just love to see at the church that any kind of shift in perspective on war not simply come from an America first perspective, like, I don't make as much money because my money's going to fund a war. It's like, well, yes, that's true and that's bad and immoral, but there's something deeper than that, like it has to be rooted in the way of Jesus.
And my hope is that, like, Jesus the revolutionary would actually get to transform and touch our cultural Christianity, our American Christianity. I'm like, once that happens, like, Omasan showed me how to live for something, not just belong to the group that's winning, or not just be told that I get a spot in the group that will accept me. Like, we need meaning and we need purpose. But Omasan showed me just how to actually build something, how to live into something. And I think that's the Jesus way that I hope catches this generation, not just a suspicion that they're just getting used for something and it's not going to go well for them. But I also want them to be ignited to live for something and say, you have 8 billion people on this planet, all created by God. And if you get in the room with them, you're going to feel it and you have something beautiful to be part of. Like, we need you. We need your voice. Like, our communities are incomplete without you. So please show up. Like, I think I started the Waging Peace Project because I really believed that activating justice and instigating joy by committing acts of courage right where we live was how we were going to role model and also invite the next generation to, like, have their story. Like, we need them. And unless we invite them and say, man, we are incomplete without you. Like, bring your talents, bring your passion, bring your world, like, do it here. Then somebody else is always going to give them a lame story. And then they're going to be like, well, sure, I'll sign up, or sure, I'll be in the whatever the Lord's army is, like, the new version is. I'm like, no, you're so important. And I think that, waging war is so simple, but waging peace is really how we follow the Prince of Peace. And it's relational and it's connected. And there's a place for every single person at the table right where they live. And so I think the next generation needs to hear that we want them more than corporate America does. We want them more than, like, the global US Army, wants them, that we care for them. I think that living for something is how we move past a lot of these death dealing divides, and also, like, mental illness and, like, all of these things that our kids are carrying a lot right now. I'm like, man, invite someone to the team. Like, it connects us to the truth that we are all part of the team, and it feels right, and it gives energy and persistence. And I think that's the stuff that we got to start inviting kids to. It's so easy to see what we don't want, but the best critique is just the practice of something better.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, before I let you go, tell us about the Waging Peace project that you just mentioned.
Oh man, I always tell people that, in 8th grade science class where you got to do a group project where somebody, like, was the writer, someone, like, made for me, it was like a 6-foot paper mache slug. I don't know why that was what we chose. But I'm like, this piece is the best group project you're ever going to be part of. And we help people take one action locally and then one action globally. But I think that being invited to just take an action right where you live, to put your faith, to put your body next to somebody in your community who needs something, I'm like, this is how we start to build the peace that we want. And also, people are kind of sick of Christians talking and not doing. So I'm like, if necessary, use words. Like the old Mother Teresa is like, preach the gospel of misery. Like, and I also think that the things that changed me were showing up with people that I was told not to see, or if they're having a problem, it's their problem. And so I think like Jesus oftentimes just says like, just show up with me. And if he is first in line with the hungry, the homeless, the poor, the incarcerated, then like, that's kind of where it's going to be. So I tell people that we activate justice and we instigate joy by committing acts of courage right where we live. So whether you're a mom with kids at home, whether you're 85, I'm like, this is like the community that is going to be the bright spot in your city. And you don't have to do it alone. Like nobody can do it alone. I can't do it alone. Because it's always hard to push back on the easy narratives that say we know what we're against, but we don't ever build or show up for people unless we figured everything out and have to have agreement. I'm like, you don't need to agree with anybody. Just show up. When they say they need help, like show up. So we do that through justice, joy, and storytelling. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is the Peace Hero Awards. So we've got many awards for like business people, athletics. We don't have any awards for someone who's putting the characteristic of Jesus and peace on display. So last year, in the eve of the presidential election, the night before, we gathered 150 people from my Duluth community into a middle school auditorium, and we crowned and announced the very first Peace Hero Award. So hundreds of people wrote in their teacher, their teenager, their neighbor, and they nominated them for the Peace Hero Award. And a Peace Hero is just someone who is making a positive change right where we live. And so instead of looking at all these stories that tell us to demonize someone or that our neighbor sucks, is going to ruin the country, we ask people to look for who is doing something positive right in their neighborhood. Cool. And the stories were incredible. We had coaches, we had kids, people were crying, and we ate like a cake buffet after. And everybody said like, one, I had no idea I could feel like our community is like thriving and I can trust my community to show up for me and my kids no matter what happens the next day. And then other people were like, I've lived here 30 years and I had no idea so-and-so lived here or was doing this. And so we were connecting people to the good things that were happening and showing our kids that we value peace, not just athletics, not just success, that they can be honored too. Yeah. So we're doing that again every year on the eve of the national election.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So that's one thing we do, Peace Hero Awards, where we put stories of peace in public. And then we also practice joy by, I do hospitality and a meal for our homeless neighbors every month. There's just a house, it's a Catholic worker house where you show up, make tacos, hang out, play with people's kids, play some Uno, which I'm really bad at. I didn't know until I go there. And then justice means if there's injustice happening, then we just speak up. Whoever says it's happening, we show up for them locally or globally. So it's a pretty simple thing.
What's the website so people can check it out?
It is wagingpeaceproject.org. But if you want to check out the Peace Hero Award, which seriously will give you a whole dunk of hope, that is peacehero.org. And we created resources. You can do it in your community. You can do it in your family. But calling out the good is going to rewire, I think, our brains and our kids. And it's also going to like put roots in our community of respect and of honor, which I think we got to plant them if we want them.
Yeah. I invite people to check out those two websites. Also check out Diana's book, Waging Peace. All the links are in the show notes. Diana, thank you so much for being a guest on Theology Raw. This has been an absolutely fascinating and eye-opening conversation, and many blessings to you and the work that you're engaged in.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.